We've got Shemaiah Gonzalez here on Evening Magic, the 15th episode. Shemaiah, this is our first time talking. Good to see you.
And I'm so happy to see you. I've been wanting to hang out with you forever. So, I'll take this. I'd rather do it in person, but this is great.
I remember that one time when you went to Biltmore, I was like, she's in spitting distance.
That was so much fun too. That was a blast. I'm
And
reading this. Oh, never mind. I was going to tell you, I'm reading a book right now about another like big house. And so it made me think of that time at the Biltmore. Uh,
Empty Mansion, is it a nonfiction book? What kind of book is
yes. It's about one of the heirs of the Clark copper fortune, and she lived until she was like 100 and something. It's crazy. I'm almost finished. It's very good.
So, what were you doing in Asheville?
Um, let's see. I was there for Image Journal's Glenn workshop. Every year they have a week-long workshop, and Image Journal is a faith-based arts journal, and they have classes, and then they have lectures in the afternoon, and you get to hang out with a bunch of creative people of faith. And that is the first and probably last time it'll be in Asheville. It used to be in New Mexico for years and years and years at St. John's, and then during COVID they had to switch locations, and then now St. John's, I guess, isn't going to have them there. So it was there for one time only. This last summer it was here in Seattle, which was extremely convenient for me. Um, so I had never been to the South before. And when I said that out loud, when I was there, people said to me, "You're still not in the South, Shemaiah."
And that's probably the truth. Asheville has a nickname, the Santa Fe of the South. It's
Oh, funny.
what'd you say?
I said funny since they used to have it in Santa Fe. So
Yeah, you're exactly right. I think that there's an art scene it is trying to go, but people don't go to Asheville to buy art like they do in Santa Fe. The Also, like in the late 2000s to the mid 2000s, everyone in Asheville was an a-hole. Like they were rude and mean. And then I noticed that they started getting nicer. And I found out that a lot of them had moved from Ohio and places like that. And you would start to see celebrities there. I was at a restaurant with this woman that plays tennis with Donald Trump one time. And then just recently, I went back for my birthday this past weekend, my mother and I, and everyone was mean again. And it made me feel good that maybe it was getting back to its roots. But their nickname, like if you're from Asheville, one of the nicknames is Ash Hole.
oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's the reputation. And so that's kind of cool. But what else did you get to see when you were in Asheville?
Well, that was when I went to the Biltmore, that was my day off. They give you a day off to explore things, and I went with my friends, a couple, and we went and explored the Biltmore. I was starving, so we split up because I thought I could find food. I kind of did. And then we met back up together. I went to a couple of restaurants and I went to the downtown area. But besides that, I think that was it. But I thought everyone was really kind because I'm from Seattle where everyone's pretty snotty and rude. So I was like overwhelmed with kindness. Like I remember getting teary-eyed a couple of times. I was like, everyone's so nice here.
and and they are nice, but you can bump into the ash holes. Um, and but like for instance, I interviewed Pam Van Dyke of Regal House a couple of episodes ago, and in the late 2000s, I told her about this interaction that my mother had with this one guy who works at a bookstore, and she was asking about their food and their drinks, and she was asking like, who brings it out, which side do you order from, and every answer was like this: yeah, yeah, you can either side. Yeah, whatever. Like it was very dismissive. And I told Pam Van Dyke about that. And she goes, I think I had the same interaction with
The
that
same
person.
person.
Right. But then you come to love it. And I did an investigation trying to find this person. And I think that his name is Rivers. And I would leave him a note like, hey, I stopped by again to say hey. And of course, he never got back to the note. Either they didn't give it to him or he didn't see it or he didn't care. But I thought it was kind of cool that other people in the world knew this interaction with this person. So it was kind of
That's
cool.
funny. What were you gonna do? Like interview him as her or
No,
something?
I wasn't interviewing people. I like to meet people anyway and talk to people. And this is just a good way to do it. But I would have just been like, hey, let's hang out. Like, I went to New Orleans and I saw this great piano player in Lafitte's pub. Have you ever been to Lafitte's in New
I've
Orleans?
never been to New
Yeah,
Orleans.
because you've never been to the South.
No.
So
Oh,
Lafitte,
that's the South, huh?
well, it's not really the South either. The what you did see in Asheville, you probably saw a lot of churches.
Mhm.
And there are a lot of churches everywhere in the South. I can throw a rock and hit a church, and it would bounce off of that church and hit another church right here where I live. Um, and there's just a lot of churches in the South. A lot of them are going empty now, unfortunately, but that's part of the South. I think that people will talk to you, they're friendly. We know people in other areas of the state because it's kind of it's not as densely populated as it would be in Seattle. So
Yeah.
I know people in Greenville, which is 200 miles away. I know people in Asheville. I know people in Charleston, which is 100 miles away. It feels like a little network of everyone. It feels like a community. We know everybody. We know like the different types of people. For instance, in North Carolina, there's a town called Lumberton, and it's got a high concentration of Lumbee Indians. And Lumbee Indians is a Native American that wasn't always recognized by the government, but recently they got recognition.
Huh.
And they have similar last names like Chavis, Cummings, things like that. And I met a guy today, and he had the last name Cummings, and I said, "Are you Lumbee?" He didn't know what it was. He was from another state,
Oh,
and but it was just from around here. Everyone from there is a Lumbee Indian if they have that last name. And
Robert, you're so nice and friendly and adventuresome to meet all these people and interact with them. That's so
thank you. I love it. It's a passion. I like hearing their things. But anyway, so I was get back to the New Orleans story. There was this lady, and she might have been in her late 60s at the time, and she had long blonde hair, and she was playing songs on the piano in Lafitte's. And it's a piano bar with no electricity. It's all lit by candles. And we were calling out, sing a song about Mardi Gras. And she's saying, ain't no place to pee on Mardi Gras Day. And we said, sing a song about the devil. And she's saying, the devil went down to Georgia. We were just having lots of fun like that. And then um, I I was very curious about her when I left. So I called up and I found out her name. Then I looked her up on the internet, and she has one album,
mhm.
and it's from the 70s. And I bought the album from eBay. I went back to New Orleans, and then I found her at a different restaurant called Irene's. And I started requesting her songs, and she was like, "It's freaking me out that you know my songs." And then she was playing the piano, and I started writing her fan mail. And so we talk on the phone now, but she was just so good. And so I started telling people, "You must go see Angèle," and they would go. And she's exciting. And there's a video that I tweeted because one of her songs was stuck in
Oh,
my head.
yes. No, I remember. I'll look at the tweet again.
Yeah, and it's she's just like her this song she wrote for Windjammer, and Windjammer it's got like 20,000 views or maybe more on YouTube. I can't remember. She also told me she lives off royalties because she was backup vocals for REO Speedwagon's
Wow.
album. You can't tune a piano, or you can tune a piano, but you can't tune a fish. So just interesting stuff. And she was at Anne Rice's house one time. I could go on. I wrote about her in a story. She's in one of my stories, and it's the real person. And she's told me I've been immortalized.
Wow. So
Yeah.
now you're friends with her. That's so
Right.
neat.
Yeah, I always feel like I don't just meet people and gush. I meet them and become friends with them. That's what I want to do, and it's
What
fun.
an outstanding quality.
I like friends. I like a lot of people. I want to get to know people and stuff like that. So, and I feel like you like to do that too.
I do.
All over the world. You've expanded beyond the United States to the world.
I don't know about that. I mean, in England, people would talk to me, but we went to, um, but at the same time, in England, people will talk to me, but they'll never talk to me again. Because I like passed out my card. I'm like, you should email me. Never heard from anyone.
Hmm.
I had like, I mean, I like shared meals. I like stayed with someone. We were in a monastery for 2 days, never heard from them again.
Hmm.
So,
Oh, that's sad. Well, maybe one day. I know that sometimes I do overreach and I make contacts that, I just can't keep up with everybody. But when I went to Germany, they don't like to talk in Germany. And I found one other person that liked to talk, and it was this older lady who's probably in her late 70s, and she couldn't speak English, and I couldn't speak
German.
Deutsch.
Oh,
That's why she called it Deutsch. But she did do this. She said, Migert. And I said, Robert. And then we kind of talked to each other and nothing was happening. And her daughter was kind of half translating every once in a while. And the woman said, it's so nice to meet a young person who wants to smile and talk. It
oh
is
my
because
goodness.
I know because no one
Oh,
talked there. So that was
yeah.
fun. And I made some friends on the train and I sent some beef jerky to them because they couldn't get beef jerky. This other German, we could only understand each other if we used Italian accents. So we talk like this, and
What?
then we could understand. So that was fun.
Oh,
Um,
well, I just got back from Italy, but we didn't talk to anyone. So
did you learn anything? Any parts of any languages or anything when you were there?
no, I'm fortunate to have my own translator with me. My It was just a trip for me and my husband, and he speaks Italian. So I just sat there and he ordered things and they appeared, and I didn't have to try. I mean, I said grazie all the time. Even when I came home, I was still saying it in Italian, and someone was laughing. I said, "Oh, I just got back." So
Um, Now I know that you've mentioned on Twitter or on X that
yeah,
your husband is Mexican. So he
yes,
speaks Spanish and Italian.
he does. He speaks a little bit of French as well, enough to get by. Like when we've been in France, he's been able to order, and you know
I know all those romance languages kind
they're
of go
similar.
together and they're able to make do. And we have such a hard time as Americans only speaking one language.
Yeah, I only speak one, so I married up. I tell everyone that I married up. This guy, he's brilliant and he speaks lots of languages and he's wonderful. And he cooks. I don't like to cook and I'm not very comfortable in the kitchen. And right now, in fact, I mean, I guess it's not cooking, but before he went to work, he put a roast in the crock pot. So my house smells like roast meat right now. It's wonderful. So he's just dreamy.
That's nice to hear. But whenever I hear that, I always wonder how does the other, like if you're very satisfied because he's great, and I don't mean this in a rude way, I'm just very curious.
Well,
What
yeah,
do
what
you
do I
bring?
bring?
Yeah, what do you bring? What keeps him around?
Well, I think part of it is one, I have a good attitude. He in the past he's quoted that scripture from Proverbs where it says something like it's would be better to sit out on the corner of a roof than to be in a house with a grouchy woman
Awesome.
or something like that. A quarrelsome woman, is that what it is?
Mhm.
And I think that that's what I bring to the table, that I am not quarrelsome. I can't even think of fights that we've had. We've been married for 20 years and we've known each other for 30 something, 33 years. I don't know, something like that.
How did y'all meet?
We met in high school. We did not date in high school. I went to private school from kindergarten to eighth grade. And the first day of public school for high school, he was sitting behind me. And I just thought he was a weirdo because I went to private school for all those years. And then a couple years later, I would notice him down the halls because he's a really big guy, and at that time he would wear a big leather jacket, and he would sort of bounce when he walked. He kind of still does. And I was like, oh. And he hung out with this guy that was kind of a troublemaker. And so everyone would sort of like, you know, when they would come down the hall. And then a couple of years later, we were all in theater together. And theater is a funny community because you all date each other, you know. You pair up and then you break up and someone else pairs up and nobody has hard feelings about it. It's just, you know, it's theater. And one of my friends was dating him, and I was dating one of his buddies. And so I got to know him a lot better. And I was like, hmm, there's a bit more to this guy. But it wasn't until we were both in grad school in different states that we started dating. So 13 years later.
So what state did y'all meet in?
Los Angeles. Well, outside of Los Angeles, a city called Whittier, named
Okay.
after John Greenleaf Whittier.
Okay. And now y'all live in Washington.
Yes.
And do you only have one graduate degree?
I have two. I went to seminary before he and I married. We were dating when I was in seminary in a different state. And so I have an MAPS in intercultural ministry. And then a couple of years ago, I finished an MFA in creative nonfiction. So I have two graduate degrees.
Okay. I knew about the MFA. Where'd you go to get your MFA?
Seattle Pacific University.
Is that one of those low res?
Yes, yes. And it's here in Seattle. And we would meet out on Whidbey Island for the residencies. But I just went to two and then COVID hit. So most of my MFA was online.
Oh, that sucks.
It did.
I did a low res MFA also. I went to
Yeah.
Queen's University of Charlotte,
Hmm.
and I wouldn't have liked it if it were just online because I liked, seeing people that were
Yes.
pseudo famous. Although
Yes.
I was not my regular self when I went there. I just was like, I'm gonna gush over these people. I'm gonna read their books and stuff like that. And I think they had a hard time with me because I was
Because you
like,
were fanboying.
yeah, I was fanboying over them. And I wouldn't have done that if we were in real life, but I don't know. It was just the proximity was different.
Yeah.
It was just, I had Pinckney Benedict, who he was famous in the 80s. I mean, famous enough to be on MTV. Um,
Ooh.
yeah, he was studied under Joyce Carol Oates. There was also Elizabeth Strout there. She was not there.
Oh,
I
she's
was there.
fantastic. Yeah, she's fantastic.
And let's see, I'm trying to think who else. The current poet laureate is at Queen's University. I can't believe I can't remember her name. I know it. I had COVID like a month ago, and I still get COVID brain every once in a while. What was her name? The current poet laureate. Oh, this is so embarrassing. I can't edit it
Oh, I don't remember
either.
who it is right now. Is it Joy Hargrove still or no?
No, no, it's Ada Limon.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah,
Ooh,
Ada
that's fun.
Limon. Oh, I
Oh,
can't believe I
did
blanked
she
on
do
it.
a reading?
Hmm?
Did she do a reading for you guys of her poetry?
Oh yeah, but we hung out at the bar with her.
Yeah, isn't that great? Yeah, I mean, that's what really you're part of what you're paying for when you go to those low residencies is just the access to people, you know, for you to have, conversations with them and for them to know who you are. So when you're coming up, there's someone to reach out to, you
Right.
know. We we only had two residencies in person for mine, but one of those times, Jericho Brown was our guest lecturer, and that was wonderful. And then he won the Pulitzer, I think, 2 years later. So, I have a picture of of us together. So that was really exciting. One of my prized possessions.
Were any of
And
your mentors famous?
pardon me.
Were any of your mentors famous?
Uh, well, kind of like what you say, it's like famous in our circles. Maybe not other people would know who they are. But Lauren Winner was my second year mentor, and she's quite popular in the Christian writing world, and she's just a fantastic writer. But and actually the draw of why I went to Seattle Pacific is because I wanted to work with her. Um, it
Were
is
there
what it is.
so were there other Christian writers there, or was she the only one?
Oh, well, it is a Christian, it's touted as a Christian program.
Oh,
So
I didn't know that.
yes. So Scott Carnes is the who's a poet, is the director of the program. Um, I don't even know who's there anymore because it's been a while. And what I understand is the program's I'm not certain how long it's going to last. So
Hmm. And did you
and that's all
study?
I'll say about that, Robert, since you warned me about cancellation.
Right. So did you studied nonfiction when you were there?
Yes, yes, I did. Yes, I did. I mostly worked on a memoir that I hope one day to finish. I wrote the first third of it. It's all mapped out, but then other projects came along. So, um, but it's a memoir, kind of a spiritual memoir written as a prayer to God. So, kind of in the tradition of Augustine. But of course, I'm not Augustine, so it's not good. But it's such a rewarding experience because it's so Ignatian in practice, and just to see where God was in my life, where he was present. So I hopefully one day I can revisit it. I turn in the manuscript for this book in at the end of February. So maybe while I'm waiting for edits, I can revisit the memoir of it. That would be lovely.
I've got a couple of things to say. I hope I can remember them all. You you right now you have a Substack.
Mhm.
What is the Substack so people can find it?
It is called Undaunted Joy. And I know my name's hard to spell, so looking up Shemaiah Gonzalez is sometimes hard and difficult. But if you look Undaunted Joy up, you'll find it. You'll find my website, you'll find my Substack, and uh, it'll be pretty easy.
All right, I've read one of them at least. I've read other ones, but the one I remember was the Killjoy one. Is that one out yet?
I really enjoyed that one, and I expanded it for the book. So Undawn to Joy, the Substack kind of started as an experiment to see, could I sustain writing about joy every single week. Did I have that much joy within me? Was there enough topics? And I thought it would be neat to write a book on it, but kind of wanted to experiment with the idea first. And so every Sunday, I put out something not very edited, less than 500 words on where I found joy that week. And one uh, one uh, post, I suppose I was trying to find the word for it. One post, the one on Killjoy, came out when I was in England. I went to England in January to meditate on joy, and I stayed at Benedictine monasteries mostly, and just prayed with monks and took long walks, and that post came out of that because I realized how in life many times I've been a killjoy. So I called it Confessions of a Killjoy. And it's come, that idea has come up more often since then. And so I wrote a longer, more detailed essay for the book that has come out of the Substack, because yes, I could indeed sustain reflecting on joy weekly. And I wrote a book proposal, and it was picked up by HarperCollins. And so I have a contract with them. The book is almost finished, and it's a collection of essays on joy. And they are told that it's just storytelling. It's not like researched uh, essays or academic essays. It's just storytelling of. So there's some essays are funny, and some essays are tender. Um, last week I wrote about behind the camera here is a window looking out to my yard. And I wrote about just finding joy in the urban bestiary of my yard, the little animals that come. And I'm almost downtown Seattle. So, but it's funny how many animals are here. I've written about joy of naps because I take a 20-minute nap after lunch every day. And that one's a little unhinged.
A siesta.
Pardon me.
It's a siesta.
Yes, it's a siesta. And then I've written more tender ones. I'm trying to think of one of the tender ones. The joy of knowing that you're loved, and knowing that God loves you, even if you don't do anything. You know, there's times that I've struggled with depression in my life, and you start to feel so worthless, and like all I'm doing is laying here in bed, and I can't even get out of bed, and I'm so worthless. And it's like, no, God still loves you. He still thinks you're valuable, and how that knowing that you're loved propels you to get up, to get out of bed. Because when you feel loved, you want to please the one who loves you.
I do like the things that when you write about God on Twitter, I do like that because you're conscious of the theology behind it. Sometimes people will talk about God and it it can go down you can go down a wrong path thinking that this is an important thing that they're saying, and really it's not. Like you talk about God in a sentence and it sounds like it's got some weight to it, even if they're just talking nonsense. And there's one things about the South, because we're the Bible Belt, there's a lot of spooky spiritual people, and they're doing things that has nothing whatsoever to do with anything biblical, but they just say the word hallelujah a lot, and then it just becomes kind of heretical sometimes.
Yeah.
But you're very conscious of theology. So I know that when I see one of your posts about God, that it's not just something willy-nilly, or you felt a certain, or you were euphoric. So you wrote something that you kind of assigned to God. And I appreciate that. And there was, from what I've been able to tell, is you've converted to Catholicism. What were you before, and like how did that come about?
Well, I grew up in Southern California, and my parents were part of the Jesus movement when I was born. They were very young. I wouldn't call them hippies, I'd call them hippie adjacent. But they went to a Jesus movement church, very much like, I know there was a movie that came out recently, Jesus People, that covered that movement in Southern California. And many of the people in that story I knew that either preached at my family members' weddings or funerals, or I met them at different times. So it was a movement of very young people who had, many of them had done drugs, and then met God in some way, and usually hallucinogenics, and put hallucinogenics away, and we're finding God in sobriety. And so that's what I was born into, and was part of that movement probably until I was 5 or so. And it's so funny because a lot of people that end up converting to Catholicism or other higher churches, and they talk about deconstructing or things like that, they're so negative about their past church history. And I just feel like I've learned so much from each of the movements I've been a part of. And in the Jesus movement, I learned community. I grew up in, from birth to 5 years old, where my parents could drop me off at someone's house for a weekend and know that I'd get taken care of. And I grew up with all of these kids, and we were all we all had one parent who was white and one parent who wasn't white, and it was just such a community of potlucks on Friday, and being together and just living life together. And I'm glad that I knew that. Then I moved into, I went to a Brethren school from kindergarten to eighth grade. And Brethren is it's not Plymouth Brethren, it's Brethren, which is a offshoot of Baptists. And during that time, again, people like to put down Baptists or Brethren, and I learned a really strong biblical base out of that experience. I mean, I know the Bible um, from my school, and those people from that little school, I can't even tell you how many people were at the school, maybe 300 from kindergarten to eighth grade. So it was pretty tiny. Um, and those are the people who resurfaced all over the country during COVID when everything got crazy and people wouldn't talk to each other. And they all came out of the woodwork and we supported each other through it, even though we didn't live with each other anymore. Um, and so I loved that. And then in high school, I went to charismatic church, the Vineyard, and in Southern California. And I went there probably high school and a bit of college. And through that movement, I really learned how to experience the Holy Spirit in a way that I hadn't through the Baptists, and certainly not now that I'm Catholic. And I thought it was quite beautiful. And I have a sense of the Holy Spirit's presence and working in our lives in a way because of that. Um, and then when I started dating who would end up being my husband, that's when I started going to seminary, a Protestant seminary, which I think at that time I don't know what they are anymore, but I know they're going through some different changes. But back then they said they were non-denominational, and I would say they were most closely related to a Baptist background. And again, learned so much about theology during that time. Mostly what I learned though is that I don't know anything. You know, you went to school through, what was that, 2 or 3 years, 2 years, and I just came out of there thinking, wow, there's so much more to learn, and I don't know anything.
Do you by chance know Doreen Virtue?
No, I don't.
Have you heard of her?
No.
She lives in the Pacific Northwest, and she is a Christian convert from the New Age. And I think she was
Oh
on
wow.
Montel Williams, and
Oh my
she
goodness.
she knew Sylvia Brown. They did not get along, and now she makes videos on YouTube because her books and her angel cards are still out there, and she doesn't want people to use them, and she doesn't want to lead people down the wrong path.
Oh, interesting.
So that's what she does. And I get a lot of theology lessons from her because she interviews people and they talk about like Trinitarianism and
Yes.
um, uh, well, which also goes along with modalism. And these are things that I didn't know about before that maybe I thought I had a handle on and didn't. And so she's interesting, and she's in the Pacific Northwest. So if you
Wow.
want,
And what's her last name? I started to write. I've already taken a couple of little
uh,
notes from you.
virtue.
Okay. This is me at coffee dates too. I usually I have my little journal and coffee dates. I'm like, hold on. So I take notes wherever I am.
Yes, that's cool. And one of the things that's interesting when you were reading the Bible, I saw that you had an NIV.
Yes, I know it's not the Catholic Bible, it's not the Catholic translation, but um I guess that's the one I used in seminary. So I feel like I'm most comfortable with the NIV when I'm trying to look deeper into word meanings or it's just, and I like the language of the NIV better. Um, it's just what I like. Yeah. I
Oh,
don't have a deep explanation for why I use the NIV. Also, like I bought this big Bible and it has my name on it, and it's been with me for, gosh, this is from before I was married. So this is a 20 something years old. It has all these papers in it. This is,
hold it up again so I can see. Oh, wait,
it's
it's a
like,
study Bible.
yes, it's a study Bible as well. And and it has my maiden name on it, Ferguson, and it's just stuffed with everything.
Hmm.
So
Well, that's interesting because I asked you if the Apocrypha was in that.
no, it's not. And I haven't read the Apocrypha. I know.
I have a
Bum, bum,
Bible.
bum.
I
The
have a
Shemaiah, the Catholic person, has not read the Apocrypha. I
I
just
have a
haven't.
Catholic Bible here, and it's got the Apocrypha in it.
Mhm.
And but I didn't like the translation. It's like some kind of American translation or something, and
Right.
it's way too conversational. And in like the Book of Judith, it's I was really kind of surprised. Like, and then she ran up the stairs and she went to her makeup mirror. Like I was like, wow, this is like a novel, and that's what they
Dramatic.
because it's biblical fiction. I think that's what they called it. And then you have Maccabees and stuff like that. But I haven't read the all of it. I'm actually reading the Bible through all the way for the first time. I
Yay.
didn't want to I didn't want to read one with the Apocrypha, and I was like, let me just do my roots and then
Yeah.
I'll look at some other things too.
Yeah.
Um there was have you heard of Ask Cliff?
No.
Okay, it's Ask Cliff. I think he might be on TikTok, but I see him on Reels, and he's an apologist, and people ask him questions. Sometimes they're ontological questions, like the existence of God, and sometimes they're about the nature of God. And he's
Mhm.
always on college campuses,
Okay.
and he answers the questions, and it's very interesting. And just to hear different perspectives and to hear his answers to a lot of questions. I know that growing up, I had big questions as a little kid.
Mhm.
To mention the movie Lucky, I faced the void very early, like maybe 6 or 7. My mother came into the bedroom and I was crying, and she said, "What is it?" I said, "Everyone's gonna die. Mima's gonna die. You're gonna die one day." And she quieted me and she said, "But not for a long time."
Yeah.
And I remember that's what she told me. And so that was the void right there.
Yeah.
And I would ask people like at church, like, how was God always here? And they were just like, oh, it's just a mystery, that kind of thing. And then I asked a Catholic teacher that I had, and I went to private school the whole time. This wasn't a Christian private school at first, it was secular, but it was secular where I asked it. And she said, he answered that. He said, I am that I am, which wasn't the best answer. She gave it to me like a kid.
Yeah.
And I could have handled the St. Anselm argument probably then. If you can imagine a world where God does exist, then he must.
Mhm.
I didn't
Oh,
find that until
that's
last year. I'm
beautiful.
like, that satisfied everything.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, so that was that. So then, but when I saw Lucky, I liked that he was facing the void. And I've watched Harry Dean Stanton interviews, and he thought the Buddhists had a interesting idea about reality. Of course, he didn't actually meditate, and he talked about meditation with David Lynch. But David Lynch, I don't think he's a Buddhist. He does transcendental meditation, which is
Ah,
a bit of a
okay.
cult. So, so Harry Dean was not part of that, but someone but I always, and Natalie Goldberg, who we talked about earlier, whose rules are on the wall, she is a Buddhist. She's a Jewish person who's now a Buddhist, and she writes from like Buddhism. And a lot of what she said about suffering and reality is what stuff that Harry Dean Stanton said, and that's, I guess,
In the
why
book,
he likes.
in the movie.
Right, right. So then, someone asked Cliff if he read other religious texts, and he said, yes, I read all of them.
Oh
I
wow.
I wanted to know why I believed what I believed, and I wanted to know if Jesus Christ had the best argument. And he said, and he's got the best argument for reality. And he said, I don't know how to pronounce Buddha's real name. Is it Siddhartha? Siddhartha?
Uh-huh.
He said he's got great teachings on reality. No one does better about reality than he does. But then what next? Only Jesus Christ said this is how you know God. And I know that a lot of Buddhists, including Natalie Goldberg, they don't understand how to meet God, that you just face the void and there's nothing.
Mhm.
And that's something that Harry Dean Stanton had to deal with. So I kind of thought um, it was interesting that Well, who's that one father who's on YouTube and is from like the 60s?
A father from the 60s, like a
He had a TV
priest.
show. Yeah,
Oh, I know who you're talking about, but of course I wasn't alive during the
neither was I. What year were you born?
Sheen.
Sheen, yes,
Yes,
Fulton Sheen.
yes.
He said the beautiful things about other religions are because of God.
Yeah.
And so I think that um, what Buddha came up with was probably pretty accurate with reality. It makes it maybe anybody could figure out reality if they looked at it enough. Um, but we don't have a lot of time for that. We only have like maybe 80 years if we're lucky. So um, so don't get confused about what reality is. Don't think that you're living in a dream. This is all here. It's not going to last. Let's move on to other things. Let's make sure we're thinking the right way. So I appreciate that, and I'm glad that you watched Lucky. And I even asked for that. What's a movie that has a philosophy or a faith that you don't agree with but you enjoy? Is that how you posted it?
Forgot. I don't know if that was me or I don't
It was
know.
you because I replied to it. I said Lucky, and that's when
And
you
that's
watched
that's
it.
how I ended up watching it.
Yes.
It was so good. It took me 2 days to watch though because I just have no attention span for TV anymore. But it was so good, and I love Henry Dean Stanton too. Um, just I feel like we all have a history with him because he's been in so many films. But it was so quiet and thoughtful. I'm glad you pointed it to me. 'Cause I don't watch a lot of movies anymore. Um,
I watched it over 2 days also.
yeah,
When I first watched it, because it was slow and but it was beautiful. And I did all kinds of research. It takes place. It's actually shot in California, in a little town. Maybe it's called Pico. I'm not sure. But then some of the scenes were shot in Arizona, so you could get that cactus.
yeah, the big huge cactuses that are in
Yeah,
there.
yeah. So I was interested in that. And
I
you,
think also speaking to what you said earlier about Fulton Sheen, another way to put it, I was thinking was one of my professors from seminary would say, all religions have a bit of truth to them, and in that they point to the ultimate truth, which is Jesus. And I really liked that. He was for my world religions class, and we would study different world religions and then find connection points with those religions to Christianity, and how we could talk about them. But also that was 20 years ago, so I'm not as sharp anymore.
what
But
was that?
go ahead. Sorry.
What was that memoir that you were gonna read? I just tagged on to it. It was the guy that I think you did read the memoir. His wife committed adultery, and then he wrote about how he got through it.
Oh, Harrison Scott. He has three names. Is it Scott Key? Am I thinking
I'd never heard of
Harrison
him
Scott
before.
Key? Yeah. I really want to read that book. I've read I've read some of his other books, which I think you would really like him because his humor is he's yes, Harrison Scott Key. And the book is How to Stay Married, the most insane love story ever told.
It just was so titillating.
Yes.
The
And I love hearing stories like that because people give up on marriage, I think, and there's so much divorce. And I remember years before I ever dated my husband, I was at this church in Portland, and it it was a singles church. So they had a single service. It was a Presbyterian church, and they had a single service on Sunday evenings. So people called it the hookup church because because you would go there and hopefully find someone to hang out with. Excuse me. And I remember I was hanging out with this one guy, not romantically at all. In fact, we always thought we looked like brother and sister, and so we'd call each other, brother or sister. Robert, what is this face that you're making? Or are you just frozen? Anyways, I'll just continue talking until it unfreezes. Oh yes,
Okay,
yes,
there we
yes,
go.
yes, yes. Um, and this guy told me that the pastor, he was in a small group with the pastor, and the pastor told him about how and the pastor had been married for 20 years at that point, and he shared with this small group of men that there was a time in his marriage with his wife where where he didn't feel like he loved his wife during that time, and that they moved through it, and that they just pushed through it. And the the other youth, the other young adult like me, told me that story, and I was so thankful to hear that, because it just gave me a realistic picture of marriage, that sometimes you don't like each other, and sometimes you don't even feel like you love each other, but you've made a commitment and you have a family, and you can find it again, hopefully. And this pastor and his wife did find it, and they were very much in love when I knew them. But to know that they had gone through such a hard time, I think was very helpful to me. And I hope my husband and I never go through that. But it's nice to know, I mean, there were times when the kids were really young and I didn't see my husband that often, because he was working so hard for us. And it was hard, you know?
Um, I've interviewed Katherine Heine, and she writes short stories, and she's written a couple of novels also. But I noticed that a lot of them had adultery in them. And I
Huh.
asked her about that, and she said, "Well, I like to write about people in the middle of things, in the middle of their marriages, middle of life." And she goes, "And you have to have some kind of conflict."
Well, you have to have some conflict or it's not interesting, you
Right.
know?
But she's got a lot of interesting stories. Her newest collection, I can't remember the name of anything. But
No, that's me too.
She's Katherine Heine, and she got a new collection, and I recommend it because I am in the acknowledgments. So I want everybody to know
Oh, isn't that wonderful?
it is. It is. You can go to Barnes and Noble and get it, and there's my name in the acknowledgments. Probably on the same new arrival shelf as Death Valley by Melissa Broder. And if you open up that in the acknowledgments, you see Tao Lin in the acknowledgments. So I'm on the same shelf as Tao Lin, who published me in
In
Moo Moo
some way.
House. It's happening. It's that Ron Paul gif. But I used to actually use the Laura Dern version of that gif. It's happening.
Like
So
6 degrees of separation.
right, it's even less now.
Yeah.
We've got even less now between us, and now maybe with Doreen Virtue. So it's expanding. So towards the end of the interview, Shemaiah, or at the end of it, Paul Leslie from the Paul Leslie Hour at the Paul Leslie on X. He's got a podcast. It used to be a radio show. He always recommends turning over the show to the guest so the guest can say whatever on her heart, whatever is on her mind, knowing that the message could reach anybody at any point in the future.
Oh my
So, with that
goodness.
being said, Shmai, I'm turning it over to you to say whatever you want. The show's now yours.
Wow. You didn't even give me a heads up on that. How am I supposed to think of something on the spot? I think I think what I'd like to tell people is what I've been reflecting on the last year, with Undaunted Joy and with writing the Undaunted Joy book, that pay attention to where you find joy, even in the small things, because that's where God is present. Joy is the presence of God, and that's Him revealing Himself to you, even in a nap, or the animals outside my window, or whatever that is for you. I mean, Robert, you've been sharing how to connect with other people, on your travels, and at bars, and on walks. That's that's where you find joy. So That's where God's presence is. That's where he's revealing himself to you. So that's what I'd like to share.
Thank you, Shemaiah Gonzalez.
Thank you.